You know how people say they have unpopular opinions and then they say something that's not that unpopular? Well, I have an unpopular opinion. I loved Charlie's Angels 2019, and just because a movie flunks doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. So, contrary to almost actually every other movie review I've seen on YouTube, I actually think Charlie's Angels 2019 was a great reboot, and here's why. But before we even get into that, I'd like to say that there's many factors that could lead to a movie flanking other than the fact that it's bad. And I think for this particular movie that was exactly the case. For instance, there was poor marketing. Of course, they did press tours, because even online you can see they did interviews before they did do press tours. However, I don't think that was sufficient, because we had major news companies and so many people saying that they didn't even know that the movie was coming out. So the marketing was not necessarily sufficient, and I think that was the main reason for this movie's flanking. And also another factor that could have led to this, which is also under marketing, is the fact that the trailer was truly disappointing. Now, I don't know if this is a problem in like just around the world, because if you guys remember in my previous movie review on Savage Beauty, that was also a problem I had with the trailer. The trailer is supposed to make people want to see the movie, not sell the movie, and not at the same time not sell the movie. There has to be a clear line between telling as much as possible without really revealing anything within the trailer. But the trailer was very disappointing for me, and that is one of the reasons I can attribute to the failure of this movie. However, that said, that other than the marketing, I genuinely believe that if we're being as objective as possible, then this movie was actually a really good reboot, and we'll go deeper into that. But before we do, please make sure you're subscribed to help me get to my next goal of 500 subscribers. I'd really appreciate it. So let's get into the video. So, seeing that this is a very, very, very unpopular opinion, that I'm saying that, no one else that I've come across, and I've watched a lot of movie reviews on this, looking for this so that I make this movie review, thinks that the 2019 reboot was a good reboot, then I'll be doing this video in two ways. First, in the first half of this video, I'll be telling you guys the standard that I use to measure what amounts to a good reboot, and then in the last half of this video I'll be responding to what other YouTubers have said and what they think is a good reboot, and why this particularly wasn't a good reboot. And with that, I hope to have convinced you to watch this movie if you haven't already, or to see a different angle in this movie that you probably haven't already. Also, I have to mention that I think the fact that this movie is on Netflix now gives it a better chance at being at picking up the numbers it never did in the first place, because I genuinely think that this is a good movie, and that people only hated on it because other people hated on it, and that everyone was saying it was bad. Because for me, that was personally the case as to why I didn't watch it, because everyone was saying it was bad, so it wasn't it wasn't like my cup of tea, like just to sit down. It wasn't something that was on my list to sit down and watch a movie that everyone is saying is bad. But yesterday I saw it on Netflix, and I just decided to watch all three movies consecutively, and I was very impressed. And so yeah, we could get into the video now. What is my standard of a good reboot? One of the metrics I use is a movie that has invested, or a reboot rather, that has invested in the budget. This can be seen in this particular reboot in various ways, including the variety of the locations they used in comparison to the previous sequels, as well as the investment in the fashion and wardrobe in comparison to the previous sequels, as well as the investment in the number of crowd scenes, where they invest in a lot of cast in different locations, and even in the fight scenes, etc. So you could definitely tell that this particular reboot invested in the budget, and they were not sparing anything with that regard. The second metric I use to determine whether a reboot is good is the storyline and the plot. Now, granted, a lot of YouTubers who did their reviews noted that had a particular problem with this particular metric, because every movie review that I watched that had a problem with the plot was in such a way that I think is biased. This is because I believe that the plot of a movie is entirely in the hands of the writers. So if you are to critique it, then you can't be critiquing it on the basis of, I think it should, on the basis of your personal biases on what you think the movie should have been, rather on or what you expected to have happened in the movies, rather what you thought was problematic in the plot itself, not or whether it was relevant or whether it was irrelevant, even if it was problematic. Because yes, it could be problematic to you, but that's the plot, it's the story. So I think with this particular critique, then a lot of people were just imposing their personal biases on what they expected the movie to have been or not to have been. And I think this was particularly problematic in very many ways, because at the end of the day, you can't say that a movie is good or bad just because it had an ending contrary to what you expected it to be, or they talked about something contrary to what you expected it to be. Because granted, it being a reboot, as long as it has correlation or there's a linkage to the storyline in which the original sequels of the movie are based on, and it has a linkage and relation to that, and it still makes sense and is still relevant, then the plot is not necessarily problematic. So I think that's another thing that I just have to say, that I had no issue with the plot, and I think that the plot was actually very interesting. It was very empowered, and which leads me to my next metric, which is that, you know, I think there was a lot of character development in comparison to the first two sequels of the movie. And this is because we see the diversity even in the angels. We see that there is diversity. They even expand the agency to be international, which goes back to the fact that they invested in the budget as well, because we also see the investment in technology in the movie. We see a lot of people and energy were put into this film, and you can definitely tell with regard even to the casting, which I don't see we'll respond to that in the second part of the movie, but I really didn't see a problem with regard to the casting. I actually loved that there was diversity with regard to the first three angels, and I did not have a problem with Banks directing and being in the movie. I did not see that as problematic because it did not really take away from anything. There were some of her comments that we'll talk about in the second part of this video that took away from the essence of the movie and helped in improving other people's points that the movie was, intended for a message that it was not. But still, her being in the movie, just from an objective point of view, did not take away from anything, in my opinion. The final metric I'm going to be discussing before we move on to the second part of this video is with regard to the niche or category in which we place this particular movie. This is or in which we place a particular reboot. This is because this reboot, for a lot of people, was intended to be purely action, and I think that is why in the reviews and in how people interpret this movie, then it's not funny or interesting or entertaining to them enough for them to regard it as a good movie. However, I think this is problematic because if we just decide that this movie is purely action and it cannot be action and comedy, then that becomes like problematic. I've said problematic so many times in this video, guys. I'm sorry, I don't have another word. But yeah, I think that becomes problematic because it can be both an action and a comedy movie. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that's something that we need to acknowledge. Also, I don't know if I've said this before, but I really think that the fact that this movie is now on Netflix, it's going to have like a really good chance to do well in comparison to when it was not, because when it was not, it couldn't be, people will search for an action movie and it doesn't fall there, and you search for a comedy movie and it doesn't fall there. But here it's under both, and it's easier for people to relate with it here, since it's, I don't know how Netflix does their thing, but it's under probably action comedy category. So yeah, I think the fact that we put it in one particular scene, also the fact that people just expect the fight scenes to look a particular way in all movies. I liked the idea of them just putting someone on something on someone's neck and then they just fall down. Yeah, there were actual fight scenes, but the fact that we expect there to be bombs all the time makes it predictable, which makes the movie less interesting, which beats the purpose of there being a reboot in the first place if it's just going to be us seeing the same thing over and over again. So I thought that was quite interesting. And finally, before we move on to the second part of this video, I also thought the fashion in this movie was great, especially in comparison to the other movies. I thought the fact that they invested in the wardrobe was very, very commendable, especially because I believe that the standard for this is way higher in reboots, and in reboots actually expect the fashion to be more invested in. But I have to say that this doesn't hold much weight in this particular movie because it's not a fashion movie, but still it's important. So now let's move to the second half of this video. Also, before we move on to the second part, I just have to say this: Ella Balinska's career should have skyrocketed after this film. I think it's unfair that having given such an exceptional performance in this particular movie, she did not get the deserved recognition she deserves. But yeah, I think she should have gotten that, like, this should have been her breakout role or something, because I genuinely think that she really stood out in her role in this movie and that she did exceptionally well. So in part 2 of this video, I'll be responding to some of the major issues that people who did reviews on this particular reboot pointed out, and I'll be trying to counter what they said and hopefully show you that this isn't, it mostly was biased in my opinion, and hopefully we can all give this movie a second chance.
No one wanted a Charlie's Angels reboot. Not Hollywood, no one. A couple years ago, Banks herself started going around saying that she wanted to reboot Charlie's Angels and put a feminist spin on it.
Okay, so firstly, I don't think that's true. And secondly, I don't believe that's relevant. So onto why I don't think that's true. Obviously, you can't prove that people didn't want a reboot. I wanted a reboot. In fact, I even still want a reboot of this reboot, of the third reboot. I want a reboot. So it's not necessarily, and this is why I say it's not relevant, because the reason we make reboots, or the reason filmmakers make reboots is not because people are asking for reboots or because they're in demand or because they are necessary. That's irrelevant as to why a movie reboot would be good or bad if we go by those standards. I think Banks had a genuine reason to make this reboot, and even the reason that she gave is very relevant. She wanted to give it a feminine spin in the modern context. That is a relevant and a good reason to make a reboot, to give it a new side to it, to continue a story in a way that other people didn't see. Those are actual genuine reasons to do a reboot, and therefore I do see the need for a reboot. And I don't think that whether or not people are actively demanding for a movie that was produced 19 years ago, which would be another reason it wouldn't be in demand, not that it matters, but that's all I have to say with regards to that people don't have to be demanding for a reboot for filmmakers to exercise their freedom of creativity to make a reboot.
I'm a feminist. Let's just talk about that. It seems like Banks and I kind of have differing views of feminism. To me, feminism is equality regardless of gender, race, sexuality, creed, etc. And it seems like hers is men aren't as great as women, women are better, and all of that.
All male characters in Charlie's Angels are in some way douchebags who treat women in a derogatory sense. I think there's a grand total of maybe 3 good guy men in this whole movie. And one of them dies, another is cleansed of his whatever sins by a woman's beauty, and the last is like the perfect man straight from a dystopian world where women have enslaved men.
So another common issue that I noted that a lot of people had in common with this movie was the theme that with regard to women empowerment, that in the way that it was portrayed in the movie. So a lot of people felt like the movie was created in such a way that yes, women were empowered, but it was only in a way that was degrading men and that was disempowering men. To be honest, I didn't notice or see it from that angle when I watched the movie. I was and that's just to show you that I was very objective. I hadn't hadn't watched any movie reviews before I watched the movie, so I was watching it with a very clear mind. The only thing I knew was that people didn't like the movie. However, I didn't know this was one of the prevailing reasons. And so when I watched the reviews and saw that this was one of the ways that people interpreted the theme of the movie, I was a bit you know I was a bit shaky on that, because I didn't perceive, or I didn't see the movie as that. And this is because there is no at the end we also see that the people who do these reviews and say that the men were all degraded, etc, they say that there's no actual male characters in the movie that were not portrayed as bad, but we actually see some, like the saint. We see even the development of the first initial villain character who Kristen was fighting in the beginning, as turning out to be good at the end. There's also the guy that died. He was a good character, a good male character that one of the angels was actually fighting to protect as well. So I didn't particularly see that message. However, I do understand, or I would like to understand, that was the interpretation, but only because I believe that interpretation was fueled by the fact that banks made very controversial statements while marketing the movie, and while giving reasons as to why the movie failed. I attribute that largely to the fact that Banks said that, because if you're watching the movie with Banks having said that in mind, then you're likely to interpret the message of the movie like that. So I largely blame her for that, for those statements that she made while marketing the movie, that kind of proved the people who misinterpreted the message, in my opinion, right. So yeah, I definitely think that the women empowerment issue was something that that could be a shaky issue depending on your interpretation, but I also believe that largely it was fueled by statements that were made outside the context of the movie. But if you're being objective, I really didn't see that as an issue, because there's no point in the movie where they say things like, or they do something that actively makes me believe that men are bad, women are good, women are better. In fact, that wasn't even a prevailing theme in my mind while watching the movie. But I could be biased, Let me know in the comments below, if you've watched the movie, what you thought about this particular theme. Also, the other reason I think that this particular theme was misinterpreted is because there was a part in the movie that we had a female villain, or the perception that there would be a female villain, and that was when Banks' character was perceived to have betrayed the angels. And so it wasn't necessarily a problem of whether or not women would be portrayed as evil. Rather, it was just it just happened that the plot ended that it would be unpredictable, and that no, she was expected to be bad, then she wasn't bad, then Patrick Stewart was the bad guy. But it wasn't necessarily a thought that came to my mind of, oh wow, so now it's not the woman that's bad anymore. So I think this was a misplacement of gender, a gender war that literally isn't even there when you watch the movie. I think, in my opinion, that's not the first thing that comes to my mind. I didn't even think, to be honest, of this movie or any other Charlie Angels movie. If we are placing all these standards on this particular movie to have an equal balance on male villains and women villains, and male heroes and women heroes, then it kind of misplaces the message of the movie. And as long as the message of the movie is not to degrade men, then it's not problematic. I'm not saying that's not a problem that's there. I'm just saying it's not a problem that's there in this movie particularly. So therefore, I did not see this particular problem in this movie. But do let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this particular theme, and whether you felt a bit off on the women empowerment thing, or whether to you it was also just an issue of it wasn't even here or there, or you didn't even notice it, or if you did, what you thought about it. And maybe you can help me understand you or your point of view better.
Basically, the core message of Charlie's Angels is that women by nature can do anything. And in of itself, it's a great positive message to have, especially for younger female audiences. But the problem is that the movie quickly grows so obsessed with this theme that instead of it being positively empowering, it actually becomes negatively degrading. Because when Charlie's Angels proposes that women can do anything, it doesn't mean that women can do a certain specific set of things they set their mind to. It means that women by nature can do literally everything. And before you accuse me of saying this is a problem just because I hate women, hold on, because there's actually a major character-related issue that comes with this obsession. The issue that it makes every female character and main hero very shallow and superficial and takes away their individual uniqueness that's supposed to make them who they are. To showcase what I mean, let's look at our three main angels. One of them is this tall angel who initially is established as the sort of physical brawler of the team. She's bulky and powerful. She likes to solve obstacles by running straight at them and punching them until they're no longer obstacles. And that's great. That's something we can understand and delve much deeper into throughout the movie. That's who she is. But then...
You ready? Came in and you gave me
The phosphorus.
It's my favorite chemical.
all of a sudden, this physical brawler turns out also to be a super smart chemist nerd. And to be clear, she doesn't become that. She doesn't learn to be that. She already is that. Because again, women by nature can do and be everything. And what exactly is the issue with this? Well, it's the fact that because at first she is this one specific thing, but then also turns out to be this entirely other thing, suddenly we don't really know who she is. Example, look at Kristen Stewart's angel. The way the movie tries to establish her is that she's this confident, street-savvy hustler of the team who uses her wits to gain an advantage over others.
Pretty's fine. I nabbed his ID card from the gym this morning. Hi.
But the issue here is that the movie also presents her as just as competent of a physical brawler as the tall angel, which not only makes her witty hustler personality kind of pointless, it also destroys her individuality. It's hard to know who Kristen Stewart is as a person when she can do and be the exact same as the person right next to her. And if we don't know who she is, it's hard to get into or develop her as a character when we're not even sure what it is we're getting into or developing.
I think these unfair standards that we have on reboots really should be reconsidered in a way that even if we expect much better, it's not to the point where they are contradictory, because why are we putting these writers and producers in a position where they're damned if they do and damned if they don't? If these characters are developed in such a way that they're so distinct from each other, then that's a problem. But if they're developed in such a way that they're too common to each other, then that's a problem. Therefore, I thought what they did in this particular movie was brilliant, because with these particular two characters that this particular reviewer is talking about, he's basically saying that because both of them have distinct characteristics and personalities, then that's, problematic because they're unique. But at the same time, it's problematic that they have a common they share a common strength, which is the fact that they both can fight. But this common strength is necessary, seeing that they are both Charlie's Angels, so it's not completely out of the question that they both can fight. In fact, it's necessary to have Charlie's Angels that can fight, which is something that was also there in the sequels of the movies. We saw in the original Charlie Angels, in fact in the original, all three could fight. Therefore, in this movie, this particular development where we even have a new Charlie's Angel that is new and fresh to this and can't fight, and one that can fight strongly but also uses her brain sometimes to fight in smart ways, and another one that is just stronger physically and also mentally as well, but is stronger physically, then we see a diversity in terms of roles and characters, and I don't necessarily see why that's a problem. In fact, if anything, this diversity is what I think makes this reboot stronger than any of the sequels and makes it a good reboot. So I don't necessarily see why this is a problem. So yeah, that was my movie review on Charlie's Angels, the 2019 reboot. And I've realized this is the first movie review I've actually done. I'm always doing reviews on series, which is interesting. So yeah, this is actually my first movie review, I guess. So yeah, thank you guys so much for the support through the past year. This should be my first video of 2023. I'm so grateful for all the new subscribers, all the new people who've joined the family, everyone who supports this channel by commenting, liking, sharing. Everything is truly appreciated and it doesn't go unnoticed. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Kindly leave this video having engaged with it if you've watched till this far. Leave a like, leave a dislike, leave a comment, just do something, but don't watch till this far and just leave. You know, it's not fair to the creator, to any creator that you watch a video and do that too. So yeah, and this video, before I forget, is dedicated to my friend Femina, who's just helped me with something that I've been stressing over for a while now. So yeah, I just decided to give her a shout out in this video. And yeah, so I hope I see you guys in the next one. Make sure you're subscribed and I'll see you in the next. Bye.